We're going to let Kelly mix it up with Ann. She, her from California wants to know about communism. What is it and what is it not? And now you're on. Now you're on, Ann. How you doing?
Hi, guys. How's everybody today?
Great.
Good.
Great. We're having a lot of fun. How are you?
Well, sounds like you're having a lot of fun. I'm doing pretty good. I turned 58 years old yesterday, so
congratulations!
Congratulations!
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the reason why I'm calling is because this is something I haven't really given a lot of thought to in a long time. But like you guys are talking about communism, and I grew up, 58 years. I've been around a little while. I remember the Soviet Union. I remember East and West Germany. I remember, things like that. And like I am originally from Orange County, California, and it's very right-wing, conservative. I mean, Nixon was born there, and so that's kind of how conservative the place is.
Mm-hmm. I said I've been there twice, and once in reality.
Well, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, Ann, why don't you do this? So your question says, you want to know about communism, what it is, what it isn't. So let's see what your impression of it is, right? You grew up in a post-World War II era where anti-communist rhetoric was popular in Western culture. So why don't you, in a nutshell, real quick, just tell us, 15, 16, 25-year-old Ann, what was she told that communism is?
That it was bad, that it was authoritarian, and that capitalism was the way to go.
Okay. Well, you know what I want to do? Yeah. I've talked a lot about communism, and I have some remarks on that, but we did bring our backup host, Kelly, up, and I want to give him an opportunity to address these preconceived notions. And Kelly was actually around when communism was invented in 1860.
That's
so
right.
he could actually speak intelligently to it. So Kelly, why don't you reflect on Ann's perspective there?
That's where he got his hairstyling tips from Marx himself.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I totally did. Oh, and my barber was Wild Bill Hickok too.
Yeah.
Am I talking about the definition of what communism is?
What's your take, Kelly? That's all we want to know.
I like a lot of what she just said just kind of resonated with me, because that's what I grew up being taught as well too. All these are the bad guys. You guys. And I think a lot of it had to do with when I was growing up, a lot of people still remembered World War II very well, and people remembered Stalin and his totalitarian government. And I think a lot of people associated that totalitarianism with communism, which, it is a form of it, I guess you could say, but it is totally not like pure communism. So, yeah, so I have softened myself to the idea of communism as I've gotten older. I don't think that a pure communist society would really work out that well.
Yeah.
It kind of squashes the reason for competition, and competition drives ingenuity. So. But on a political level, I prefer it to capitalism, but I think, like I said, we need capitalism to drive that ingenuity. People are always going to come up with something new just so they can get rich, right?
Yeah. So, Ann, in your, in asking what communism really is, so theoretically, communism, like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels introduced in their work, the very famous Communist Manifesto, which was more of a call to action than maybe a doctrinal approach, but basically saying that the workers of the world unite. Right, that's the common phrase. But the workers, the people who actually produce materials are being exploited and not being compensated, right? And so there are several stages that a society has to go through to arrive at communism. And I don't remember exactly what those are, but basically it starts with exploitation, and as a result of capitalism. And then capitalism will be removed through revolution. And then society will operate in such a way where everybody reaps the benefits equally. And that doesn't mean that there are not leaders or there are not certain power structures. What it does mean is that the people, it would be a true government of the people, and that everybody would kind of get an equal, get equally what they get out of it, would get, excuse me, I'm going to do that again, would get out of it equally what they all put in. And I think an example of that on a very microscopic level would be something like Native American tribes or any kind of tribal society. They've got leaders, they've got people in certain positions. There are different authority levels, but everybody kind of benefits from the group. I think that would be the best way to look at that. But then again, to apply that on an international scale is what Marx and Engels called for. And we have never seen it happen because that ability has always been perverted and corrupted by a political elite party. And that party, the existence of that party renders the idea of communism even taking place impossible. And
So there's some thoughts there, Ann. What do you think?
That's giving me a lot to think about, because it kind of sounds like communism is almost like a reaction to capitalism.
yeah.
Okay.
Very much
Definitely.
so. Very much so.
Yeah, definitely.
Marx and Lenin were responding to capitalist conditions that were already occurring in their lifetimes, and seeing that exploitation of a certain class of people. That's why they even talked about introducing this idea of class structure and class society. They had this idea called dialectical materialism, which was this idea that you could divide people into sort of castes throughout history, depending on what they have and what they have not, right? And he said that this was kind of recurring in different cycles and stuff. Now, historians will debate time and time again how legitimate this lens is and how if it applies to all societies or not. But in the broad strokes of history, you can definitely see the case. You can see the case being made for people who own the means of production tend to do better than the ones who don't. I don't think that one's too much up for debate, right? They seem to be doing pretty well. So, just calling that out and saying, hey, we need to do something about it. I mean, that's where these ideas first started. How well they've been implemented and how to go about the means of equalizing things, of course, always is in debate, including for those the tankies to the socialists. Everybody has their own takes on that, but just calling this stuff out, I mean, that was the original game plan. That was the idea.
The miners wanted to make money off the mine that was being profited off of by the mine owner, right?
Yeah. So
yeah,
there you go, Ann.
The person who controlled the production method was the one who was making the money off of it.
Yeah.
So, Ann, what do you think?
Well, it sounds to me, I mean, I guess the way things are now, it sounds preferable to capitalism, but it also seems like the devil is in the details, maybe, and then it also might depend on who has the power of how it's being implemented.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is very much true. There's about as many communist denominations as there are Christian ones. Okay, so you can find probably not right as many, right? But the idea is still there, right? There's been different interpretations on how to do this, and that's where people find their qualms. What a popular suggestion that people go to is to look at states today and see how they're doing. Oh, well, the Nordic countries seem to be doing pretty well. They're not communists, right? But they're definitely more socialist than the U.S., and that distinction, ruffles some feathers. I was just having a conversation with my mother-in-law yesterday. My mother-in-law is a wonderful woman, But I was telling her about how when my wife and I were in Japan last year, we could go out on the streets at night and feel so safe because nobody has guns and nobody has anything going on there. I mean, you can get a gun, but the application process is a bit more stringent. So less people have them. And she fires back at me saying, "Well, I bet they have less rights in Japan there." It's like, they seem to be doing pretty freaking good to me. I mean, if they really wanted to own more guns, I'm sure they could protest about it. But the fact is, they don't need to own one because they don't feel like they need it. and you know what? I had a great time there. But that's this American idea, right? Of like, oh, well, we need to have our rights. We can't have the government do everything for us. And, I would argue it's much to our detriment. And other people who feel the same way would feel as well. Obviously, I want rights just as much as anybody else. But what does that actually mean in practice? This is the whole debate, right? This is what it means to be a communist or be a socialist or whatever, is how much does the government get to do and how much does everybody else get to do? I would say that the current way, maybe we need to fix some things. Maybe we can take some inspiration. That's my take. I don't know.
And the floor is yours.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you. If you so, in the event that you're not sure, you're mixed up for words or whatever, I want to ask you this, okay? To respond to this. So you gave us an explanation of how you were told to view communism growing up, right? And obviously, we've uncovered some details that might change that view, but when you were being implanted with these ideas, how were you also implanted with how communism relates to religion? Were you told that they were all evil atheists, and that communism and atheism were one and the same? And what was that experience like?
You know what? I don't really remember being told that communism equaled atheism. I think that's something that I kind of heard later on as I was already questioning a lot of my religious beliefs, but I had been questioning a lot of my religious beliefs ever since I was a little kid. And here's something I remember, like when I started kindergarten and you had to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And I always remembered that under God part making me feel very uncomfortable. I was 5 years old, and I just remembered like the under God part in our Pledge of Allegiance making me feel a little uncomfortable. Like for my view, it was God was for home and church.
Yeah. Yeah. To be fair, I think it's a lot of evangelicals that kind of make the ties between the two. And again, it's not entirely fabricated. It's not without some historical precedent. There were, I already mentioned the Soviet Union had the League of Militant Atheists, right? This was kind of a thing, right? This idea of linking these two ideas together. So it's not completely out of the blue. But there was an association for a while with atheism and communism sort of being un-American, right? Both of these ideas, whether you had one or the other, sort of went against the grain. And it's one of the reasons why the Pledge of Allegiance is a thing in schools. It is a reaction to that came into play during the Cold War, and even on our own printed currency. We talk about this all the time, where it says, when you have God on the dollar bill was not a thing before, the 1950s. And that's purely in response to this sort of Cold War that's happening. So, yeah, these ideas definitely, whether or not they took effect on you, it sounds like maybe they didn't take quite as much of an effect, but they definitely took effect with a lot of other Americans who were like, oh yeah, this is this atheism stuff, this communism stuff. That's not part of the American way. We're a Christian nation,
Yeah, and that gets back to our first caller's point about maybe an education system being leveraged by a government or by a party to control the narrative, to control their education by putting certain ideas right in front of them all the time. And so I just think that exposing kids, using the apparatus, the architecture that education systems provide to spread your own message is something that we've seen, in the Cold War era, and why we have the views that we do. Because, just like religion, governments have a tendency to put their ideas on children and get them while they're young. It's good for the survival of that ideology. and it doesn't make a difference if it's religious or political. And I think that relationship also transfers over to the relationship between communism and atheism. It doesn't really matter if it was an apolitical or atheist movement. They kind of have politics and religion kind of have some of the same methods. And when I gave my intro today, I talked about whether it was either a secular or religious movement. There are a variety of movements that have used education and controlling the message and brutal tactics to get their point across. So yeah, I kind of diverged a little bit, but yeah, to Dan's point, I mean, using the education, controlling the narrative, definitely something we've seen in our own life. Kelly, you got anything?
No, not really. You guys covered it pretty well. I mean, I don't know what else I can add to that, honestly. Yeah.
That's fair. Anything else before we let you go today?
Yeah, I was going to ask Ann what she thought of what you guys have said, and has she learned anything? Do you have a better perspective on it?
Actually, I do. I just have one more question, because I was also indoctrinated to believe that communism and socialism were the same thing.
Sure.
Like the words could be used interchangeably. But they're not the same thing, are they?
So
no.
Well,
okay.
Yeah. We have, at first they kind of were, right? So when this distinction didn't come until later, after Marx and Engels, were gone, right? And so as these ideas sort of developed more, they became more broadly distinct. At first, they really weren't. A lot of people say, "Oh no, they've always been different." That's not true. Originally, they did kind of mean very similar things. As time went on, they definitely mean different things. The broader difference is the difference in control in what the state can do and what the state can't do, right? So like under communist governments, you will see a state owns entirely the means of production, right? Whereas under socialist governments, you'll see the means of production can be owned by individual citizens, right? Private companies still exist, but they're much more heavily regulated. They have much more sort of, I don't want to say owes to the government, but there is more of an idea to producing for your own state and for your own nation and for your own citizens and people, rather than just a profit. In other words, a profit motive is sort of de-escalated in socialized nations, because they don't have to make money just to profit, right? There's other reasons why businesses and organizations under socialist governments exist. So that's going to be the big thing. A lot of conservative people will tell you that they're the same thing, and they will conflate things. Well, we talked about Dennis Prager earlier, using the conflation of secular nations being atheist nations and things like that, right? They will conflate it because it's to their advantage to conflate it. And maybe they just genuinely don't know the difference sometimes, but it's always going to be to their advantage to conflate it, right? Because they don't want people to know. Because if you start to know and you start to question things, then, it kind of falls apart. But, it's a tale as old as time.
So I want to expand a little bit. So Dan, Dan spoke about the difference between socialism and communism from more of an economic perspective, but it doesn't actually only fall on an economic characterization. If you think of a political spectrum from right to left, we can apply the concepts that we commonly refer to as right and left to that spectrum. So all the way to the right, you've got your really conservative people, right? And then when you go further right, you end up with fascism. And then all the way to the left, you've got your really socialist people. And then go further left, you land on the communist people. So the way that works is the argument we're having when we talk about political theory is how much power does the government have? How much is the government responsible for? On the far right, you're basically saying the government's we have a smaller government. So common practices would be less taxes because there are less programs, less regulations, less things the government has to do. Whereas you go all the way to the left, you've got a bigger government. You've got a government in charge of more programs. You've got a government seeing to the benefits of society. So you have medicine, education, other kinds of benefits that the government is going to provide. Okay, it's the measure of the social contract. So the social contracts theory states that the government is that the people give their power to the government, and the government in exchange provides for the protection of the people. Well, to the extent that that happens determines where you fall on that political spectrum. So when you get all the way left, communism, it almost renders government obsolete because the government's so big that everybody is part of it, which is why it is comprised 100% of the people, and then all people get equally out of it what it takes to run it. Okay. Whereas socialism, you've got a political party or two or a governmental structure that's more defined in power. Okay. And so in the United States, for example, if we were to be more socialist, maybe we would have socialized medicine, right? Maybe we would have free college. These are examples of socialist policies, but not a communist government. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, actually it does, because I actually do agree with a lot of socialist policies, but
Yeah, well,
about it.
You know what, Ann? Most
Yeah.
Americans would if they
Yeah.
actually understood them. That's part of the problem, right? That's part of this conflation of these ideas. Because as long as we say socialism bad, communism bad, then that means that people aren't going to consider them because, oh, I'm not supposed to think about that stuff. That's the bad ideas, right?
I've seen polls where a majority of people will say liberalism is bad,
Yeah.
but then when given an exact topic, they always pick the more liberal answer to the question. But
Yeah.
they think liberalism is bad, but they really have liberal ideas. Most people do. Most people do. They just don't realize it because they've had this conservatism beaten into their heads, especially over the last decade or so.
Right.
And I think, what you can take away from today's discussion with us is that there are so many different definitions floating around out there that are loosely thrown around, especially by elected officials. And people just go, yeah, I agree with that. I heard a conservative elected official call a liberal person running in an election. The conservative person called the liberal a liberal fascist. Well, the person making that claim has no idea what they're talking about because liberal is way to the left, fascism is way to the right. And you know what a liberal fascist is? A conservative. I mean, if you look at the political spectrum, you're just taking fascism and moving it to the left. So, there are a lot of people that will stand up and say, yeah, what they said. And honestly, they don't take the time to make this or to understand it themselves, which is why it's so easy for people to conflate, like we've talked about, atheism and communism and make them into evil terms. When in fact, there's so much more of a nuanced approach to understanding that stuff that you are actively taking today, which is great. And it's enabling a great discussion. So thank you so much. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do.
Great.
I like you said, socialism is like for a bigger government. But I kind of feel like we do have a bigger government. It's just big in all the wrong places. And that we do have socialism, but it only goes to the top, like with tax. And I don't want to get too much into politics because I know you guys can't really get into.
Well, we can have that discussion without naming people or parties, right? I think we're doing a good job of that now. So continue, please.
Right. Well, we do have a government that does provide a lot of socialism, but the socialism goes to the top.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Or
our
at least
government,
most of it goes to the top.
Yeah,
Right.
in the form of like tax breaks and stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
yeah, and when it comes to the means of production, like Dan said before, even in our capitalist society, we've got people. I mean, do you think that people at Amazon or in charge of Meta or what have you, Nike? I mean, you name it. The executives are not reaping the same equal amount as the workers, right? And so there is a major wealth gap between the people at the top and the people at the bottom. And that is exactly what communism would seek to
Eliminate.
not only avoid, but fix.
Yeah. in theory. So
Yeah, I mean, I definitely over the years warmed up more to socialism because I had to survive through life through the capitalistic system, and I was not college educated. I was a single mom, working 2 jobs, still not making enough money to get by, wages not going up with the cost of living, and a lot of that had to do with profit.
yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
People were making the money. Yeah.
Well, whenever, yeah, to the extent we have to deal with greed, we're going to deal with wealth gaps. And again, the communist argument would render that, I guess obsolete, if you will. But yeah, I mean, I think this was a good discussion. And did you have anything else? Because
Just
yeah.
one little. Well, if you got to move on, I understand. But,
No, I mean, not necessarily, but go ahead. What's your last point you want to make?
when you were speaking earlier about people who maybe like they say they're conservative or whatever, and that liberalism is bad, but then when you give them a specific topic,
Mm-hmm.
then they're actually more liberal on it
Mm-hmm.
than they say they are.
Mhm.
And because this is something that's been bothering me. With my older sister, we are very, very close. I mean, we just, we got a thing. We can practically read each other's minds. We're just really close. We understand each other really well. She's always been so good to me, the best sister in the world. But I vote Democratic. She's MAGA.
All right. So what I want to do right there, hold on, and real quick. So that would be, the point where we would have to kind of we'd have to muddy the water a little bit. Okay. We can't be
Okay.
you could certainly be as specific as you want, but we're not going to go that route. So if you could kind of just rephrase, obviously you and your sister have different
Right
perspectives.
wing.
Yeah.
We're
Yes,
polar
conservative
opposites
ideas
on the
about how
political
government should
scale.
be run.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or she kind of votes on a right wing party line, but when we talk about individual topics like
Yeah.
care, like affordable housing, we agree across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And left-wing people broadly, and I think they should do this even more, but this has been a strategy that has been happening more and more in recent years to talk specifically more about healthcare, because if you look at all the most common issues that people are concerned about, healthcare is consistently up there, and also consistently people agree with more liberal ideas about how healthcare should be run in this country. And so more and more people are trying to campaign on this idea that, hey, we need to talk about this more because Americans mostly think that this is how the way things should be done and isn't currently being done, and how powers that be aren't letting it be done, right? So, maybe emphasizing that more and saying, hey, this is actually a left-wing idea. I don't know if you know this or not, but this idea that you want, that you think should happen, is actually more about my side than it is about your side, right?
Right. I mean, I don't even consider that like a right or left issue, really, because to me, it's just a basic human rights issue.
It certainly is, and I think most Western nations that have competent healthcare systems would also agree with you on that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of basic issues, human decency issues that I don't even know why they're included in political arguments. Equal rights, the being threatened by the existence of somebody is un-American by definition. Trying to limit people's access to certain things equally, trying to limit representation of certain groups. I mean, is something that, ironically, and this is what I love, is something that comes from the far right, who also claim Christianity as their own, and then they look to Jesus as their exemplary person who has a lot in common with communism and liberal ideals. So the hypocrisy is baked right in, and so yeah, I think I agree with your sentiment. The hypocrisy is there. And it's evident in religion, it's evident in politics, and it's unfortunate that more people don't realize it. But again, they get these terms and these ideas wrapped up in such a way where they don't do the critical thinking, and that benefits the people who are abusing their intellect and taking advantage of them and steering them in the wrong direction with straw man examples of what liberal ideology looks like.
And that is why it's so important to be doing what you're doing right
Mm.
now and asking questions and asking good questions too.
Well,
Hell
I
yeah.
try. I get curious about things. I'm not educated formally, but I do have curiosities and I like to explore things more. I just
Are you going to
get
show?
too many
Are,
topics in my head.
are you going to show your sister this episode? Are you going to tell her she should watch it?
Yeah. You show her that you called in, and then tell her, get her thoughts, what she thinks.
That would be fantastic.
Okay. I might.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
You know what? She should. Yeah.
And then if she calls us clowns or buffoons, then she can call in and she can talk to us and she can tell us what we're doing wrong, And then,
I would like that. I would actually like someone to call in who disagrees.
Well, we get that too.
Like
But
a theist to call in, or
we get
Yeah.
that too. But it would be awesome if there was a way for you and your sister to call us, and we could play intermediary, between you and your sister, and once and for all,
we were the debate moderators.
yeah,
Yeah.
once and for all,
idea.
we get to the
Dan's done
bottom.
that on Talk Heathen or Truth Wanted before.
That's right.
We can work that out.
Yeah, we
Stop
could do
plugging
it.
Truth Wanted, guys. Stop plugging. No, I'm just kidding. And hey, look, this has been fantastic. I think this is my favorite call that I've ever had with you, and I've had quite a few. So I love when you call in. Please keep watching us and supporting us, and please, remain a fan and remain a friend, and call us again. Definitely talk to your sister though.
And keep asking questions.
I will.
All right.
I
All right.
definitely will. Okay.
Excellent. Ann, thank you so much. We're going to let you go. You have a wonderful Sunday.
Awesome.
Yes, guys, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. I love that call.